대한민국의 힘이 되어 하늘길로 돌아옵니다. 머나먼 타국에서 가슴 깊이 그리던 조국. 대한민국의 품으로 우리 동포들이 돌아오는 그날이 오면 배웅한 곳에서 맞이하겠습니다.
In our headlines on this Monday, October 28th, here in South Korea. South Korean delegates are poised to brief NATO authorities on North Korean troop deployment to Russia for training to potentially support the Kremlin's military aggression against Kyiv. In neighboring Japan, Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's ruling coalition loses its parliamentary majority during a snap election this past weekend, rendering uncertain the country's future political course. And over in the Middle East, active shuttle diplomacy continues as mediators seek a ceasefire deal against the war between Israel and Hamas, while the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah persists. A South Korean delegation is poised to share with NATO its intelligence regarding Russia's enlisting of North Korean soldiers who Ukraine claims are being stationed on the war front. Our Kim Jong-sil starts us off.
Tensions are rising as new intelligence from Ukraine suggests that North Korean soldiers are being deployed to Russia's Kursk region to assist Moscow's military efforts there. According to the Kyiv Independent, Ukraine's military intelligence agency reported on Sunday that Russia is transporting North Korean soldiers using trucks with civilian license plates based on intercepted radio communications from Russian military officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a video address posted on X, warned that North Korean troops may join the battlefield in a matter of days, adding that Ukraine could soon be forced to fight North Korean troops in Europe. According to the Wall Street Journal, the 3,000 North Korean soldiers being sent to the front lines are described as young, likely in their late teens or early 20s. The report also noted that the soldiers appear relatively short and slightly built, reflecting widespread malnourishment across the regime. When asked about the humanitarian concerns surrounding this deployment, Seoul's Ministry of Unification said on Monday that it is closely monitoring the situation. On the same day, a high-level government delegation, including defense and intelligence officials from South Korea, is set to brief NATO and EU member states in Brussels. The delegation aims to provide NATO and the EU with critical updates on North Korean troop movements in Russia. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And come Thursday this week over in Washington, D.C., top defense and diplomatic officials from South Korea and the U.S. will sit down to discuss North Korean troop deployment to Russia. According to the Foreign Ministry here, Minister Cho Tae-yeol and Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun will meet with their U.S. counterparts Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, respectively. This upcoming meeting is the first in some 3 years following the last such interaction back in the year 2021. On the agenda is a possible response to the military cooperation between North Korea and Russia amid the latter's war in Ukraine. And North Korea has reaffirmed its accusations of drone intrusions by South Korea into Pyongyang earlier this month. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
The drone took off from South Korea's Baengnyeong-do Island and intruded into North Korea's airspace. This is North Korea's analysis of how the unmanned aerial vehicle that Pyongyang accused South Korea of sending this month crashed in its capital. According to the Korean Central News Agency on Monday, the regime's defense ministry analyzed the flight control program from the debris it retrieved. It claimed the drone took off from the South Korean border island at 11:25 p.m. on October 8th and scattered anti-North Korea leaflets over areas between its foreign ministry building and Seungri Metro Station at 1:32 a.m., as well as the defense ministry building at 1:35 a.m. on October 9th. North Korea has even unveiled an image of what it claims to be the drone's flight route. The KCNA added that among the 238 flight plans and logs of the drone that were recorded from early June 2023 to early October 2024, all flight data, except for the one on October 8th, showed the drone was flying in South Korean territory. Meanwhile, the North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong issued a statement that indicated her irritation over South Korea sticking to its stance of neither confirming nor denying it had sent drones. While imagining a situation where an unidentified drone flew over Seoul and scattered anti-President Yoon Suk-yeol leaflets, she said the regime would like to see, quote, how the dirty stray dogs in Seoul bark if the regime issued a similar response. Regarding this, the South Korean military said it would take measures accordingly.
If a drone infiltrates, we will take corresponding countermeasures and take the appropriate action to protect the safety and property of our citizens. As we have warned several times already, the military is prepared and will respond with an appropriate level of readiness.
Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
In other news, an intergovernmental organization, the Financial Action Task Force, has upgraded South Korea's international standard compliance evaluation grade to the highest rating. The upgrade follows an annual meeting of the task force at the headquarters of the OECD last week. The latest revision means South Korea goes from being a country that requires strengthened follow-up inspection to a regular follow-up inspection. North Korea, meanwhile, has been designated as a country with a high risk of money laundering and terrorist financing for the 14th straight year. We are counting down 8 days to the U.S. presidential election, and new polls show Democratic nominee Kamala Harris standing slightly ahead of a Republican counterpart, Donald Trump. Our Ian reports.
Turnout is key to the 2024 U.S. presidential election as the race remains neck and neck, with poll results among registered voters nationally showing a percentage point gap within the margin of error. In the latest polls released on Sunday, ABC News Ipsos shows Harris to have an advantage of 4 points among likely voters, 51 to 47%, indicating that the gap has widened since an October poll showed the incumbent vice president leading with 50% compared to Trump's 48%. But while the CBS YouGov survey also says Harris is ahead, it is by 1 percentage point, 50 to 49% against Trump. That gap has tightened from Harris's lead of 3 percentage points in October. Harris on Sunday encouraged young first-time voters during a campaign rally in Philadelphia. She highlighted that there were only 9 days left in what she called one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime.
And we must not wake up the day after the election and have any regrets about what we could have done in these next 9 days. So let's spend these next 9 days knowing we did everything we could.
On Sunday, after attending church services, Harris visited a barbershop, a bookstore, a Puerto Rican restaurant, and a youth basketball facility. The battleground state is home to a large community of Puerto Rican voters, and Harris took to social media on the same day, vowing to launch a new Puerto Rico Opportunity Economy Task Force if she wins the presidency. Meanwhile, during Trump's pre-show lineup for his campaign rally in Madison Square Garden in his hometown of New York City, some speakers threw insults at Harris, Hillary Clinton, illegal immigrants, and the island of Puerto Rico, which one comedian referred to as a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean. During that rally, Trump added a new proposal for a tax credit for family caregivers to his list of tax cuts to win over older adults and blue-collar workers.
And I'm announcing a new policy today that I will support a tax credit for family caregivers who take care of a parent or a loved one. It's about time that they were recognized, right?
On Tuesday, Harris will be in Washington, D.C. to deliver her closing argument speech against Trump, while Trump heads to Allentown, where more than half of the population is Hispanic, with the majority of them from Puerto Rico. Ian Jin, Arirang News.
In neighboring Japan, a snap election this past weekend is looking to have a profound impact on Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's ruling coalition as it loses its parliamentary majority. Our Lee Jae has details.
The Liberal Democratic Party and its junior coalition partner party, Komeito, had the majority in Japan's lower house, securing 288 seats before Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba dissolved Japan's House of Representatives earlier this month. With the general election taking place on Sunday, an exit poll by NHK shows that the LDP-Komeito coalition is set to lose its majority for the first time in 15 years. The coalition is expected to secure just 215 seats out of the 465 lower house seats, short of the 233 seats needed for a majority. Meanwhile, the main opposition Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan is projected to have gained a significant number of seats, going from 98 seats to 148. The projection also saw smaller parties gaining seats. The leader of the main opposition party, Yoshihiko Noda, said the loss of the lower house majority by the LDP and its coalition partner was a huge achievement, saying that the country is on the eve of a change of government. With the loss of a majority, the Ishiba administration may struggle to form a government. Pundits say in order to remain in power, the LDP could try to bring other parties to its coalition or simply try to rule with a minority government. Both options, they say, could put Ishiba's position as prime minister in jeopardy. The LDP has seen its public support decline significantly since a money scandal in late 2023, on top of increasing living costs in the country and a weakening yen. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In the Middle East, active shuttle diplomacy continues as mediators seek a ceasefire deal against the war between Israel and Hamas. Our Ian covers the latest efforts.
Negotiations to advance a ceasefire deal in the Israel-Gaza conflict have resumed in Qatar. According to reports, CIA Director William Burns and the head of Israeli intelligence service Mossad arrived in Doha to meet with Qatar's prime minister to discuss a hostage release deal. On the same day, Egypt publicly proposed a two-day ceasefire, during which 4 Israeli hostages in Gaza would be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails, followed by more negotiations within 10 days aiming for a complete ceasefire. On Saturday, the Israel Defense Forces announced that it targeted aerial defense systems and missile manufacturing facilities in Iran in retaliation for Iranian attacks on October 1st. Iranian state media reported that around 5 people were killed in the strikes, including 1 civilian. In what other countries, including the U.S., hope will be the end of hostile exchanges, Israel's prime minister said that the strikes severely harmed Iran and that Israel had achieved all of its goals. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader commented that the attack should neither be exaggerated nor downplayed, but he did not call for retaliation. Hezbollah and Israel continued to exchange attacks on Sunday, with Hezbollah announcing a strike on a military site in Israel's northern coastal city of Haifa. They also issued a civilian evacuation order for border areas, marking the first such directive by Hezbollah since the conflict began. According to Israeli sources, some of the 75 rockets fired from Lebanon were intercepted, but a 57-year-old woman was seriously injured. On the same day, the Israeli military ordered civilians in 14 villages in southern Lebanon to evacuate north before launching airstrikes. The Lebanese Health Ministry reported that at least 21 people were killed on Sunday in Israeli strikes on 3 different areas in southern Lebanon. Ian Hee, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in light of Israel's retaliatory strikes against Iran this past Saturday, the top office here convened an emergency meeting to address the safety of South Korean nationals in the region. On Sunday, Principal Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tae-hyo and Chief of Staff for Policy Sung Tae-yoon co-chaired a meeting with officials from related ministries. The meeting touched upon evacuation procedures in the event of heightened security concerns in the region and preemptive measures to ensure safety. With regard to the potential economic repercussions of the latest raid by Israel on Iran, participants spoke of limited impact for now, but vowed to maintain their 24-hour monitoring mechanism on financial and commodity markets. More than 100 civilians in a Sudanese village were killed by the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces this past Friday. According to the country's network of doctors, at least 124 people have been killed and 200 injured in Al-Sariha, a village south of Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Activists believe the actual number of casualties may be, quote, significantly higher, and if confirmed, this latest atrocity by Rapid Support Forces marks one of the more shocking assaults in Sudan's ongoing civil war. The civil war between the Rapid Support Forces and the military government of Sudan, known as the Sudanese Armed Forces, has led to tens of thousands of deaths since it began in April last year. The ruling and main opposition parties have launched a joint consultative group early on this Monday to promote pledges related to public livelihoods made during the April general election. The launch comes some 2 months after the first official talks between the leaders of the two political parties, during which they agreed to set up such a body. Discussions will include better support for small business owners as well as that for the chip and AI sectors. Also, given the shared concerns over the low birth rate and rapidly aging society, the Parliament is poised to note some tangible progress during its regular session in November. Eco-friendly consumption patterns are helping Korean consumers to keep a tight grip on their purse strings. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
When people bring their own cups or containers, they get some discounts or receive membership benefits at various coffee shops and beverage retailers. Consumers are giving favorable responses since they can save money and go green at the same time. Convenience stores are also welcoming personal cups by setting up washing facilities, allowing consumers to wash their cups easily and fill them up with new drinks. People can get additional discounts of 300 Korean won when they make coffee using their own containers. Sales from a franchise convenience store offering this in 2022 more than doubled compared to the previous year. Sales also increased by 46.1% as of the third quarter of this year and are still rising. In the convenience store, there is a cleaner refill station where people can get refills of cleaning fluids by bringing their own containers. Consumers can refill laundry detergent and washing up liquid made from eco-friendly plant materials. Sterilizers have also been set up for hygiene management of containers.
At the cleaner refill station, consumers can refill cleaners with a discount of around each percent from the market price.
Gyeong district of Incheon have set up a battery exchange service, switching around 20 waste batteries for one new one. The service will start to expand gradually. Eco-friendly consumption can start from where we're at. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In Mexico, a bus crash on a highway in the country's central state of Zacatecas killed at least 19 and injured 6 others on Saturday. The passenger bus, which was traveling to the Mexico-US border city of Juarez, collided with the back of a tractor-trailer carrying corn that had become loose before rolling and falling into a ravine under the highway. The State Attorney General's office said that it was carrying out investigations to arrest the driver of the tractor-trailer. Mexico's National Guard and the Army were involved in the recovery operation to retrieve the remains of the victims. US President Joe Biden formally apologized to the Native American community on Friday for the US government-run boarding school system that physically, emotionally, and sexually abused hundreds of Native American children. An apology Biden called long overdue made him the first US president to issue an apology for the program, which lasted for 150 years before it was shut down in 1969. Biden described the abuse that happened at boarding schools, which were intended to assimilate American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children, as a blot on American history, while calling it a sin on our soul. According to an Interior Department investigation, at least 973 Native American children died in these schools. Taiwan celebrated diversity in one of East Asia's largest pride parades on Saturday, with over 180,000 people filling the streets of central Taipei. Marking the 22nd annual parade this year, participants from Taiwan and around the world were seen marching in rainbow-colored clothing to celebrate and raise awareness of LGBTQ+ rights. Taiwan has built a reputation as one of Asia's most gender-inclusive countries after it legalized same-sex marriage in 2019, which was a first for Asia. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
During the day, the whole country rose to around 20 degrees Celsius, which was cool. Tomorrow will be mostly cloudy across the country, but on Wednesday, clear skies will return. However, there are huge daily temperature differences, so please take care of your health. The expected amount of rain is as much as 30 millimeters in the eastern parts of Gangwon-do province and 5 to 10 in the coastal areas of the Gyeongsang-do provinces and Jeollanam-do province. You should be careful with strong winds of around 15 meters per second in these areas. Rain will stop tonight or tomorrow morning, and Jeju Island will receive up to 40 millimeters of rain between tomorrow dawn and afternoon. Tomorrow, Daejeon and Daegu will start off at 12 degrees, Gwangju 14 degrees. Highs will move up to 20 degrees in Daejeon, Gwangju and Daegu, Busan and Jeju 23 degrees. This week, inland areas are expected to be clear without rain. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up now is our daily panel session.
오래전 바닷길로 떠났던 당신이 세상 역경을 이기고 대한민국의 힘이 되어 하늘길로 돌아옵니다. 머나먼 타국에서 가슴 깊이 그리던 조국. 대한민국의 품으로 우리 동포들이 돌아오는 그날이 오면 배웅한 곳에서 맞이하겠습니다.
How to survive in Korea. Workplace. Step 1. Lunchtime. The most important morning routine is to check today's menu. Food is essential for survival. Memorize today's menu. The highlight of office life. Lunchtime. Rice in the bottom left, soup in the bottom right. The top is for the sides. The sauce and the spoon go here. This is the basic layout, but it's a bit odd to switch rice and soup. When you're done, pour the leftovers into the soup bowl. It doesn't look that appetizing, so wait until others are done eating. Step 2. Neng, nep, nenep. These are the most used expressions at work. Choose the most appropriate form. Neng, nep, nenep. Remember that the formal ne can sound a bit stiff. Did you just say yes? Absolutely not acceptable. You want to find the right word for the right occasion. Step 3. Desteria. Desteria is the oasis in the desert. Show them your character. If you're not the diligent type, get a stooky plant. Work is tough. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone. Stay put, like the stookie that survives in the desert. Hang in there until the end. Of course, you can always quit. You matter more than anything else. Step 4. Survival kit. Every worker needs a survival kit. Survival kit level 1. This position gets the most exposure. Grab one when you need a sugar boost. Always keep a few treats you can offer your co-workers. Survival kit level 2. These are for hunger pangs before and after a meal. You'll need them when you take a coffee break with your office buddies. Survival kit level 3. Trash talking your boss with your soulmate. Did you survive in the workplace? Office romance? Be careful. Even the photocopier knows all the gossip.
Presiding over Monday's cabinet meeting following his latest diplomatic agenda in New York, President
South Korea's economy will grow.
The central bank has kept its key interest rate unchanged. Mission complete. Foreign rocket duty self-finished. Seoul is rallying in hopes of bringing the World Expo 2030. Arirang.
Russia recently hosted the 16th BRICS summit under the shadow of its war in Ukraine and much concerns over its enlisting of North Korea in its military campaign against Kyiv. We have details on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective, our panel session with members of the press as well as pundits on issues of interest largely pertaining to South Korea. It's Monday today and time for our talk on defense and diplomatic matters affecting this particular part of the world in light of the latest BRICS summit in Russia. For more on this, I have Michelle Lee, the Washington Post bureau chief for Seoul as well as neighboring Tokyo here in the studio. Michelle, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Dr. Pan Gil-chu at Ilmin International Relations Institute of Korea University live on the line. Dr. Pan, welcome back.
Hello, good to be with you.
Right, Michelle, we'll start here in the studio. Let's start off with some background information about the BRICS group. So who are they? What do they want and how successful have they been thus far?
So BRICS stands for a group of countries that are largely gathered to counter the Western-led global order and to present an alternative one with Russia and China in a leading role. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there are also several other nations that are a part of this bloc, including Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE, and other countries that are participatories in it, but not formal members of the bloc. Russia and China see this group as an important one in their joint effort to challenge the U.S.-led global order, basically saying that they don't necessarily have to abide by America's rules on how countries should interact and operate. And they want to expand this membership as much as possible to increase its influence. Other members like India and Brazil are not necessarily as anti-Western led global rule. They're more looking to enhance the influence of the Global South and make sure that the Global South countries have an alternative to America and have other options as partners who can help them expand their national interest. So there's a little bit of tension here in how these countries interact within the BRICS bloc and what they hope to accomplish.
Right. Dr. Ban, keeping in mind the current geopolitical environment, how important is the BRICS grouping in your view?
Well, I would say that BRICS expands its clout not simply regionally, but globally in a geopolitical sense. Moreover, BRICS has recently gained pace, not only as an economic entity, but also as a growing political player. BRICS was originally created to offset the Western-led international economy, which was possible under key bodies like IMF and the World Bank. But its area of concern has been expanded thanks to a changing international order. In more detail, under this new corridor order, there are new big leagues. One is the League of Democracy, and the other is the League of Autocracy. G7 serves as a key mechanism to represent the League of Democracy around the world in a situation where the UN Security Council has been deadlocked. Meanwhile, expanding BRICS plays a counterweight role against G7. In this sense, these two leagues are becoming more competitive, not only economically, but also politically. When it comes to economic implications, BRICS could serve as an optimal platform to engage in the discourse of changing the global supply chain, which has been so far led by the Western League, particularly G7. Moreover, the fact that BRICS was hosted by Russia this time could help send a message to the world that Russia is not isolated on the diplomatic stage and that the Western-led sanctions against Russia are neither meaningful nor effective. With respect to geopolitical implications, Russia is most likely to have taken advantage of this platform to justify the Russia-Ukraine war and seize the initiative of winning the war by weakening the consistent support of international society for Ukraine. Furthermore, Russia seemed to expect this BRICS meeting to cover up the deployment of North Korean troops in the war to support Russia in a situation where international society shows its growing concern about this fact. Finally, as BRICS is expanding and serves as a counter player to G7, the Global South is gaining momentum because both leagues try their best to please this body, where it is on the side of neither the League of Democracy nor the League of Autocracy under the concept of strategic ambiguity, often referred to as a strategic autonomy.
Right then, keeping in mind what Dr. Ban has just said, Michelle, if I were to ask you to highlight some of the gains for Mr. Putin from this latest BRICS summit, what would you choose to highlight?
So actually, when you read the final communique from the summit, there aren't that many concrete details or timelines of deliverables or any sort of concrete plans. In fact, the most interesting outcome of the summit may have not been about Putin at all. It may have been the meeting between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who had not held formal talks for 5 years. But nonetheless, I think it was an important messaging opportunity for Putin. It was definitely a symbolic win for him. It helped him reinforce this message that you can't isolate Russia just in the way that the West wants to do. And like Dr. Ban said about being a counterweight to G7, it gave Putin to host this largest geopolitical event that it had hosted since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And ever since the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for his arrest on war crimes charges, it has been rare for Putin to hold bilateral meetings and have such conversations with his counterparts in other countries. But at BRICS, he was able to hold multiple bilateral meetings, and he actually made a big deal about it when he was talking to reporters, like, oh, I'm so busy, I have many, many bilateral meetings at this summit. And Putin sees this group as a key tool in his plan to challenge the US-led global dominance and to destroy the power of the American dollar, which is also what China has been wanting. And Putin wants to show that the West has failed in isolating him. And in fact, he has a lot of friends on the global stage, and they're all willing to get together to talk about similar interests, and that he's an important player. So Russia happened to host the annual BRICS summit this year, and it came at the right time for him and gave him an opportunity to project his anti-West message and project that he's still an important player on the global stage.
Right, and keeping in mind what Michelle has just said about Mr. Putin seeking to portray the image that he is still relevant in the global political stage, diplomatic stage that is. Dr. Ban, what are your thoughts regarding UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' decision to attend this year's BRICS summit?
To be honest with you, his attendance is controversial indeed. In the meantime, I will say that there are pros and cons to his decision. If so, which is good and which is bad? Let me take a look at the pro side first. The UN Secretary General has three big duties under the UN body: human rights, development, and peace. Meanwhile, these duties are hard to achieve in the divided world. In this sense, his attendance serves as an active role in making communications with all sides in the divided world. Similarly, his attendance could be defined as an effort to mitigate the new corridor mechanism. When it comes to the con side, two things are raised: a rules-based order and the UN function. First, his attendance is controversial and bad for preserving a rules-based order in the sense that Russia invaded Ukraine and made a treaty with North Korea, which turned out to violate international rules. Despite this rules-breaking behavior, Putin hosted this event without any interruptions, which is not a positive sign for preserving a rules-based order. Second, his attendance could accelerate the deadlocked UN functions because it could be seen as an act not to punish Russia, leading to making the UN more dysfunctional. Russia was supposed to guarantee a full function of the UN Security Council as one of its 5 permanent members. However, Russia has taken advantage of its right of veto in the UN Security Council to maximize its national interests. In this vein, his attendance could send a misguided signal that the UN is out of the stage in this new order, and there is no problem for Russia to continue its revisionist attempts. All in all, I have to say that his attendance is more harm than good in terms of timing and venue. The timing is not good because Russia-Ukraine war continues to go on without any sign of negotiation. His attendance is not positively recommended either in terms of the venue, in the sense that the host country was Russia, which breaks the international rules.
Right. And Michelle, moving forward, now apart from speaking to reporters about how he has as many friends or more friends than foes, Mr. Putin also refrained from confirming nor denying the presence of North Korean soldiers in Russia for training. But he did insist that the matter itself was only up to Russia and North Korea. What are some of your takeaways from Putin's remarks?
I thought it was so interesting because Putin very clearly did not deny the presence of North Korean troops in Russia. And in fact, it was sort of like a vague acknowledgement. You know, he was asked about the findings by the South Korean NIS about the North Korean troops in Russia. And when he was asked about the satellite images, he said, quote, "Images are a serious thing. If there are images, they reflect something," unquote. And, you know, then he invoked the fact that Russia and North Korea has signed this mutual defense pact over the summer. And a few days later, North Korea also gave sort of a fuzzy statement. And the vice foreign minister said that if this quote unquote rumor of troops in Russia is true, then it will be an act conforming with the regulations of international law. So basically saying that we're not confirming the rumor, but if it were true, then it's legal, it's fine. my colleagues and I at the Washington Post have been verifying these social media videos of North Korean troops in Russia, and we have located the troops filmed in the videos to a military training complex in Sergivka, which is along the North Korea-Russia border. And you can hear soldiers who appear to be, of Korean descent speaking in what appears to be North Korean accent. And it seems to support claims from the U.S., Ukraine, and South Korea that these troops are already in the region, that they're being geared up to possibly deploy in the fight against Ukraine. And it seems like North Korea and Russia aren't flatly denying it either. They're not confirming it, but they're not saying this is absolutely untrue. And from their perspective, it seems that whatever they're doing on this front is a furtherance of their military cooperation, of this mutual defense pact that they signed together this summer, and that it's a deepening of their relationship to come to each other's defense if they're attacked.
Right, and staying with this military cooperation between North Korea and Russia, Dr. Ban, first Ukrainian intelligence and then South Korean intelligence confirmed North Korean troop deployment for training in Russia. The U.S., for its part, initially appeared reserved, if you will, about confirming nor denying the deployment. How do you explain this initial stance?
Well, at first glance, South Korea and Ukraine are better placed to gather information and intelligence faster than others due to their geographical advantages. That could be one of the reasons why these two countries confirmed faster than others. However, there are more complex and significant reasons as well. I would say that South Korea and Ukraine are more influenced by the growing dynamic of international security, which is a geopolitical convergence. Regional security crisis is not confined to the region any longer, but it is converging into another regional security. This linkage is defined as geopolitical convergence. The dispatch of North Korean troops to the Eurasian battlefield allowed geopolitical convergence to not only be faster, but become policies beyond the discourse. What matters is that South Korea and Ukraine are under the greater and more direct impact of geopolitical convergence to North Korean forces dispatch. Thus, South Korea and Ukraine are in a more critical moment than others. That explains why both South Korea and Ukraine confirmed North Korean troops deployment faster than others. If so, what made the United States to be reluctant to confirm North Korean forces dispatch at a fast tempo? First of all, the Biden administration was in a position to examine more carefully what was happening there before it would be confirmed officially due to its domestic politics, which is the presidential race, as you are well aware. North Korean troops deployment could be defined as a policy failure of the current administration. So under the tight race, the Biden administration appeared to be more careful of confirming its fact. Second, if the United States confirms North Korean troops dispatch, it should lay out its countermeasures, such as more sanctions against Russia and North Korea, and another support package for Ukraine. The United States might have needed more time to come up with effective and durable countermeasures.
Perhaps expanding further on what Dr. Pan has just said, Michelle, there are other observers here in the country who claim that the initial cautious stance by the Biden administration had much to do with domestic politics in the U.S. rather than any doubt or misgiving about the intelligence provided by its allies. What do you say?
So I know that it took the U.S. longer than the South Koreans and Ukrainians wanted to come out and confirm the presence of North Korean troops in Russia, but I'm not sure if it's true that it was driven by domestic political misgivings. Because first of all, foreign policy is not a decider in the U.S. presidential election. It's a very tight race for the president right now between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, but to the extent that, there's a single issue that brings people to the polls or makes them vote on an issue one way or another, it is very, very rarely foreign policy. And at the moment, it's not necessarily Ukraine. The most divisive foreign policy issue at the moment is Israel-Gaza in the U.S. And where the U.S. comes out on the presence of North Korean troops in Russia is not necessarily going to be a swaying factor in the presidential election. nor have grave consequences in the current political debate over foreign policy decisions by the Biden administration. So I'm not sure that that is the deciding factor. Based on my reporting and the reporting by my colleagues, talking to U.S. officials, NATO officials, it did take them some time to examine very carefully the evidence at hand, not just the evidence that the South Koreans and Ukrainians were providing, but independent assessments of what they were seeing as well in the U.S. and among the NATO officials. And I know that there was a lot of concern about what this could mean if the U.S. and other European officials came out and confirmed that North Korean troops were in fact planning to be deployed on behalf of Russia. And in fact, U.S. Still has not given a firm intent to the North Koreans who are training in Russia. The U.S. officials appear to still be hedging a little bit on their analysis. And I know that they see this as a potentially significant escalation in the war that could have huge implications beyond this region. And so it took some time for them to more slowly than Koreans wanted to assess the evidence at hand.
Right. Before the confirmation by U.S. authorities, Dr. Ban, U.S. Defense Secretary John Healey earlier said that it was, and I quote, shocking and desperate if North Korean soldiers are indeed fighting for Russia. Do you agree that this reality of North Korean troops being present in Russia for training to be deployed to Ukraine, does this reality reflect a sense of desperation on the part of Russia, Dr. Ban?
Well, let me give my takeaway from the perspectives of the two actors, European countries and Russia. On the one hand, North Korean soldiers' deployment could be shocking and desperate from the viewpoint of international society, which is eager to preserve a liberal international order against the revisionist attempts. In particular, European countries belong to this group stronger than others because this war is being made on their geopolitical front lines. Meanwhile, they were reluctant to directly participate in the war and instead decided to indirectly intervene in the war under the concept of proxy war. Why is that? It is because they do not want a wider regional war or a third world war. Their shock and desperation are based on the fact that their restraint did not fully weaken the possibility of a wider regional war due to the deployment of North Korean troops. Rather, their restraint allowed external actors, which is not related to the war geographically, to directly participate in the war, leading to stepping up the possibility of a wider regional war. Accordingly, they are in a more serious situation where they need to examine how to counter North Korean soldiers' dispatch, including their own way of soldiers' deployment. On the other hand, it is also true that the deployment reflects Russia's desperation because Putin would not have asked Kim Jong-un to send North Korean troops there if he had won the war early enough, according to his original plan. Putin was frustrated by his forces' incapability of winning the war amid an ongoing war of attrition. Russia had to ask for help even from a weaker actor, which is North Korea, because winning the war was recognized as the most necessary war to him. I would say that all these facts made Aloud both frustrated and desperate.
Right. That being said then, Michelle, South Korea up until now has kept its support for Ukraine to non-lethal assistance. Do you suppose the time has come for South Korea to shift its support plan for Ukraine, as of course the top office shared earlier?
I think it's natural for this debate to reemerge in the wake of the news of North Koreans being recruited by Russia. I think it's really interesting how the Korean Peninsula has become so central in this way to the fight between, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And South Korea does have a robust defense industry, and ever since 2022, it has been delivering arms to Poland, in particular K2 battle tanks and K9 self-propelled howitzers, which has allowed Warsaw to send its own equipment to Ukraine. And we know that South Korea has been backfilling the U.S. artillery supply as the U.S. sends its own, artilleries to Ukraine. But as you know, South Korean law bans the export of arms for anything but peaceful purposes. And South Korea has stopped short from giving lethal weapons directly to Ukraine. It is quite controversial still here in South Korea. And, now it appears that South Korean officials are openly talking about it as a potential as they consider how to respond to North Korean troops being in Russia. And, this is not South Korea's war to fight necessarily. It is a major ally of the U.S. But I do wonder, because considering how President Yoon envisions South Korea to be a global pivotal state, whether it is time to have this robust debate around the South Korean law and make it a public discussion.
Right then, while South Korea ponders the possibility of sending lethal weapons to Ukraine, Dr. Ban, what, in the meantime, are the gains for Kim Jong-un by deploying North Korean soldiers to support the Russian warfare in Ukraine?
Well, the gains that Kim Jong-un is expected to have can be explained by two deals: economic deals and strategic deals. When it comes to the economic deal, North Korea is expected to not only make money, but also seek food and oil in exchange for soldiers' dispatch. North Korean soldiers are defined not as real ally soldiers, but as mercenaries who make money for their deployment. In fact, Moscow appears to pay money to Pyongyang for the deployment of North Korean soldiers. Moreover, North Korean troops dispatch allows Russia to provide food and oil to North Korea. This economic deal helps neutralize sanctions against North Korea, which is necessary to achieve the final goal of its nuclear weapons program. When it comes to strategic deal, North Korea is most likely to gain strategic technology and weapons because dispatch means a high level of help for Russia on the front line, stepping up its leverage to Russia. If so, what would be on the wish list? Russia could transfer ICBM re-entry technology and the solid propellant ICBM, similar to Russia's Topol and ICBM. The wish list does not seem to stop there. Low-yield nuclear weapons, advanced SMBL, someone-launched ballistic missile technology, and nuclear-powered submarines are likely to be on the list. All in all, both deals are likely, but at the same time, how much these deals are made in practice depends on how many more North Korean troops are deployed on the front line and how well they fight there.
Right. In the meantime then, Michelle, what are your thoughts regarding the broader implications of the prolonged war in Ukraine, especially amid the growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia?
The growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia is a major concern for the U.S. and its allies, especially because there's little to be done to stop it, directly that they can do to actually stop it from unfolding. For the United States and its partners, it raises troubling questions about this, to what extent North Korea and Russia are willing to cooperate, not just in this war, but potentially elsewhere. They are two nuclear-armed nations and long-standing U.S. adversaries, and where else are they willing to cooperate? U.S. officials have said the implications are far-reaching, not just in its impacts in Europe, but also potentially in the Indo-Pacific. It raises questions about what is the state of the Russians in this fight that they're waging against Ukrainians to be leaning on North Koreans like this, not just on troops, but also weapons that are not always the most reliable that are coming over from North Korea to Russia. Perhaps Russia is truly facing critical shortages in manpower. And it also raises questions about what the Kim regime is getting from Russia, just as Dr. Ban just mentioned regarding the economic and strategic gains that North Korea might be getting. It seems like perhaps Kim sees that there's enough to gain from this deal with Russia to the point where he's willing to send his own citizens into potentially the line of fire. Asian countries, especially in Japan, which I also cover, are watching the war in Ukraine very closely about what it could mean for this region, what it could mean in the case of a potential invasion of Taiwan by China, and the broader implications that it could have for the security and the security dynamics in this region. With North Koreans getting into the mix to support by sending its own people to a war that it ideologically supports, it raises the stakes of how one conflict could bleed over into another and how it could draw in other countries in this region and perhaps even ultimately the Korean Peninsula.
Right, hence the fears of a potential wider war in the future, which hopefully will not be the case, of course. Michelle, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today. And Dr. Ban, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, on that note, we end Monday's edition of Press Perspective. See you same time tomorrow.